Hello, welcome to another episode of Cal's Questions. This is the TTRPG interview show where I am lucky enough to talk to amazing people in the TTRPG space. Today's guest is no exception. I'm also joined by Paul, as always, aka Ampersand. Paul, before I introduce the guest, would you like to introduce yourself first of all?
Hello, as stated by my beautiful co-host Cal, I am Paul, aka Ampersand. I run Ampersand Productions, which effectively sponsors and produces the show. And I'll be joining Callum interviewing the best and the brightest.
Brilliant. And our guest for this episode is a fantastic RPG creator, world builder, mythologist, and founder of Gods and Gamemasters. This is where he kindly shares his experience and creativity, provides custom pantheons, villains, monsters, and more for a wide variety of TTRPGs. He also brings his wealth of experience to multiple TTRPG actual play streams, including as a cast member on Ein Memetic Mori, the Blades in the Dark campaign from Ampersand Productions. Paul is Ampersand Productions, essentially. He's also got one of the best voices I've ever heard in my life, Jack Callum, aka the Jack the Giant Killer. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, and you are flattering the hell out of me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, and a pleasure to have you here. So, I've covered some areas there, but you are a busy man and you do a lot. So, in your own words, would you tell us about yourself and how you got into TTRPGs in the first place?
I absolutely will. I'm Jack Kellum. I am also sometimes known as Jack of Tales on various places on the web. Of Gods and Gamemasters is my company and my website and my TikTok and my YouTube. All of these things I can be found a lot of places. Easiest way to find it all though is to go to my Twitter at Jack Gogsbane and look at my drum because it's got all the links. But I've been gaming now and game mastering for 40 years. I've been running since I was 8 years old when I walked into a K&B toy store in Louisiana with my father and pointed at the Moldvay basic set of Dungeons and Dragons and said, Dad, buy me that. We can play Tolkien at home.
Hell yeah.
Because I had already read The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings by then.
Yeah.
I started The Hobbit when I was 5 and read The Lord of the Rings by 6. And I'd read the Silmarillion by 8. So,
amazing.
I
haven't
read any of those books.
Really,
that's unfortunate. I understand that their style's not for everyone. It can be kind of dense, but since I grew up with them, it's super easy, which made it easy also later to read Beowulf in the original Anglo-Saxon. I sat there with the Anglo-Saxon dictionary on one side and Beowulf on the other. I had to write the request in Runic in order to be allowed to look at the thing.
Wow, that's awesome. So, you're a world builder. I know. Don't worry. My mind's blown there, and I don't know if I'll be able to comprehend this. But yeah, you're a world builder. I've seen a lot of your work, and it's very impressive. Out of those things you said there and things you haven't mentioned, what influences you when you're creating a world? What's your biggest influence?
The first thing that started me down the world building path is Tolkien, definitely. Looking at how he put his world together and how deep it was, how rich. There are very few worlds that can compare with the depth of what he created. Even if you don't like what it is, most people agree that it's deep.
Mm-hmm.
But very shortly thereafter, The Hobbit got me started. I learned Runic from the frontispiece of The Hobbit and the maps there and the explanation in the foreword and the afterword of how the runes worked. Very shortly thereafter, I started searching for everything about ancient gods and such that I could, again, impelled by much of my reading of the Silmarillion. And I would say that it is the depth of mythology and folklore of the world combined with good storytelling from people from Tolkien all the way to modern day with Stephen Brust and Zelazny somewhere in the middle, and so it's Neil Gaiman is another huge influence, especially with his takes on mythology. So it's really the distillation of all the ancient lore we have from so many places in the world, and it just kind of funnels into my head with all the books I read and everything I look at just comes in together and builds something. And then I'll go back and do specific research when I'm inspired by a specific location.
Amazing. I mean, you've got a wealth of knowledge there, and that you've built up over the years, and it's coming through in the first few sentences on this interview show. I mean, Paul, what do you make of all that?
I'm still processing the idea that you could read Runic. I
know.
I didn't even know
Okay,
that was a language.
It's not a language. It's only an alphabet. I did not learn Old Norse. I wrote it in English in the later Futhark Anglo-Saxon specifically. So that's really the only version of Runic I learned. I did not learn all of the variations of Runic.
What's the difference between a language and an alphabet?
Oh, okay. So languages are what we speak and the words we use. Alphabets are the different ways of showing how we're going to make those words. In our case, in most of the West, we use letters that designate specific sounds, and we put them together to make a word. Across most of the East, until our influence reached them, they drew single ideograms, pictures, that represented a whole word or concept. So for them, their alphabet and their language were much closer to the same thing. But here in the West, and I'm even counting Russia in that, Russia uses a Cyrillic alphabet, but you can use Cyrillic to write any language. We use the Latin alphabet, and again, you can use it to write any language. The Cherokee have an alphabet that can be used to write either Cherokee or English. Both Sanskrit and cuneiform are pseudo-pictorial, but actually closer to phonetic alphabets. And then, of course, Egyptian was, at least in its earliest years, was fully pictorial ideograms.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, so you can we use the same alphabet all over Europe, for instance.
Yeah.
You know, you go and you pick up a newspaper in France. The thing keeping you from understanding it isn't the letters.
No, it's the different rules of the French language as opposed to the English rules. Right.
And you'll still get some of it, of course, because there are many French loanwords in the English language. Many loanwords from all over the place, but France is especially so because of the Norman invasion and the long-term wars that have occurred between your two countries.
Okay.
Wow. I mean, I often joke that this is an educational show, but today it actually is an educational show. My mind is blown. I'm going to trim it back.
It's unfortunate there's not a lot of loan words in English from Welsh.
Oh, don't get me started on Welsh. That's crazy language, and
I can pronounce the double L.
Go for it. I want to hear it.
Llewellyn.
It's very, very good. It's very, very good. Paul, your turn.
We actually recently went to Wales, and a Welsh native taught me how to speak all the double letters.
Like the double F?
I mean,
I'm still waiting to hear it.
I can't do it, but she taught me. No, I can't. My wife Lolly, she's obsessed with languages. She can pick them up really well, and she could say all the double letters. So next time we're on stream, I'll invite Lolly to start speaking Welsh to you. But I can't do it. I just don't care enough about language. I can barely speak English.
Okay, here we go. DAFFYDD. Davith.
That's Correct. That's right.
I know.
Now your turn, Paul. This is just
Uh,
going to turn into a Welsh lesson.
No,
though.
I can't. I can't speak Welsh. No, but not. That's
No,
not what Carl's
I
question
learned.
is. This is Jack.
I first learned that actually from Susan Cooper's The Darkest Rising series,
Wow. That's so cool.
and then I went looking for it. So, because that's where I read fiction, I read fantasy, I read folk tales, and then it sends me into a research spiral on whatever culture it's from.
Yeah. And I mean, Wales is usually a big part of that. I mean, for such a tiny little, well, essentially, Wales is sort of the shape of a pig's head on the side of England, if you look at it on a map. But we do have a lot of influence and a lot of history and a lot of.
Especially since Wales is one of the last bastions of the original Britons of the island. The island used to belong entirely. Well, except the Picts. The whole south half of the island belonged to your people to begin with.
Yeah. Well, I love Wales, man. Have you ever been?
I have not. I really wish I had. The only places I managed to go overseas were in the Mediterranean during my military career.
Oh, well, I mean,
is there nothing you haven't done, Jack?
it just constantly blowing my mind. Oh man.
I haven't been to Britain.
Well, yeah.
I haven't been to Scotland, Ireland, England, Wales, and I want to go to all of them. Many of my ancestors come. On my mother's side, the Irish is Tadlock from County Meath. On my father's side, the Scottish is Kellam or McGillicallum originally from the MacLeods of Skye and the Highlands nearby.
I'm saying so
I
many
don't
words I wish I could understand. It's like, I know, it's like the language thing again. Like, I know you're using English letters, but it's like you have your own set of rules.
It's called knowledge, Paul.
Yeah,
The man's
I think
full
that's
of it.
I think it's just knowledge, you know?
On my mother's side in the Americas, it's Cherokee and Choctaw, which is actually, Cherokee is what other people call them. They nowadays call themselves the Tsalagi, and the Anihuanhuia is their original name, which means the people or the principal people.
Say that again.
Anihuanhuia.
Annie.
Yunwiha.
Anihuanhuia. Is that good? Is that right?
Pretty close.
You can
Okay.
tell by his face. For those who watch on YouTube, you can tell by Jack's face. No, that was not good. No.
It's better than most people get, and he doesn't even have the letters to look at to try to figure it out.
Yeah.
I just want to apologize to anyone if I've offended anyone there, but
If anyone
you got to
from that
start somewhere. You got to learn from the bottom up. I'm going to bring it back to TTRPGs. I hope that's okay. But
I think that is actually what we're here for.
well, we're here for a chat, and everything you said there has honestly blown my mind. Lots of things I didn't know about you, and lots of things I didn't know full stop. So I am a fan of D&D. I love D&D. I've played other TTRPGs, but I do tend to come back to D&D. It is the most popular, I would say. And so a lot of people who I sit down and play TTRPGs with, it usually ends up being D&D, especially new people. So you have a setting for 5e, the Sunken Temple of the Swamp God. Would you tell us a bit about that?
Oh, okay. Sunken Temple of the Swamp God is actually part 6 of a 20-part series eventually. Blame Star Wars. It's a one-shot for 6th level characters. They are going into a swamp looking for a boy who was lost from his father's fishing boat. And they discover much more than they expected in there. I'm not giving anything away if I suggest that there's an aboleth. It's on the front cover.
There is, yes. I can confirm. And you know what? If I played that,
that art is by a very good artist at Mythic Coben on Twitter, Luke Broderick.
Amazing.
Very good artist.
That's so cool. Yeah, I'd be disappointed if there wasn't an aboleth, and there's an aboleth on the front cover, man. So
Yeah,
I'm glad you didn't
be-
disappoint with that.
Plot
right.
twist,
No,
plot
that would be false advertising, and I don't like to do that.
twist.
Good man.
But
That
It's
sounds
going to be
cool.
a 20-part series going from first all the way through 20th. Each one is technically a one shot at that level, but all contained within the Great Swamp and playable as a campaign. Either, just leveling up at the end of every module or stitching it together with whatever else you have that you want to put in. Pursuant to that, one of the big things I'm currently working on before I put out part 1 is my Marsh Cliff subsetting, which is for any world that has a big swamp. You just put Marsh Cliff like to the north of it on a high bluff or cliff, and they can use it as a base of operations for their entire campaign.
That's awesome.
It's got tons of NPCs that I'm weaving in, making sure there's a list of possible hooks to the player characters. It's got, so far, I've got 15 different maps of locations inside done, and I have more I need to do, and that's kind of what's slowing me down. Not the mapping part, but the keying, because it's boring, not because it's hard. And it starts off with, I don't know if you've seen on my website, and various places, I give away for free a town format. So this town, I developed this town format because I thought the ones that they use in the books don't tell you enough about any settlement. So at the beginning of the thing, I have this town format, and once you fill that in, you have a really good idea of what kind of settlement you have. In this particular case, it's a settlement of about 2,000 people, borders a swamp, so they do a lot of hunting and fishing in the swamp, things like that. Amazing. But it also started out as a dwarven stronghold, because a lot of people don't know that you find a lot of iron in peat bogs and in deep swamps. So it can actually be profitable to, quote unquote, mine the swamp.
I kind of, what just came into my mind then is, have you seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where he builds a castle on the swamp? And
yep.
And
third one burned down, fell over, and sank into the swamp.
But the fourth one.
But the fourth one stood, and that's where he. Yeah.
So thank you for that image. But that all sounds awesome. So definitely give that a go. Paul, we're going to give that a go.
Yeah, absolutely. I can probably squeeze in a swamp somewhere in Homebrew Havoc.
Hell yeah.
I could definitely do that. That'd be easy.
Do it, man.
If you're going to use a lot of the material when it finally comes out, you'll want it to be a pretty big swamp. There's definitely a gold dragon and a black dragon in the backstory.
Oh. I don't want to play it anymore.
Well,
man, that's sick.
A location and
no, they're in the backstory.
Yeah, I'd be happy.
They're in the backstory. I can't guarantee they're not in the forestory, but they're definitely in the backstory. Supposedly, they both got killed when the town was taken back, because the black dragon came and took it from the dwarves. Which is actually why there's a poem that I wrote that I threw on TikTok, talking about the difference between a black dragon assaulting a dwarven keep and a red dragon, and how acid is in many ways worse. Because I do tabletop role-playing game inspired poetry as well.
Yes, I've seen those TikToks. Actually, they're very, very good. Very good.
They're on TikTok. Most of them are on Instagram and YouTube as well.
Fantastic. All right, that's amazing. You're going to be a GM soon for I think I'm right in saying it's GURPS, but is it Terror at Bone Gulch? Is that what
Correct.
It's called?
Yep. GURPS Horror. GURPS Horror, Terror at Bone Gulch.
Could you tell us a bit about that? And also, is it the Successor States of Riga? I don't know how to pronounce it. Can you tell us a bit about them and what's involved, what people can expect?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So Successor States of Rega is going to be a longer one. I'm going to go ahead and start with Terror at Bone Gulch.
Go for it.
Bone Gulch it's a GURPS horror game set in 1880s Arizona territory in the United States, right between Apache territories and the Navajo territories, just after they've made the Apache reservation, basically. It's about the same time period as the movie Tombstone, to be specific, just a different part of the state. I based the fictional place Bone Gulch on a real place named Canyon Diablo, but that a lot of folklore and nonsense has risen up about.
Okay.
Among other things, nearby to both the real place and the fictional place, there is, not 12 miles away, a 50,000-year-old meteor crater. Less than 10 miles away from this place is the Painted Desert, if you've ever heard of that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a petrified forest within 10 miles. There's a place called the Apache Death Cave, where a number of a large Apache warband assaulted a Navajo village, and they killed a bunch of people, and they took a lot of children and young women back, and they were being chased by a Navajo warband, and they went and hid in this cave. Now, you can't really go down into the cave to fight them because it's too narrow, that's too defensible. People have learned a lot about trying to attack well-defended, defensible areas, especially when they tried to do it in Wales, like in Harlech Castle. It didn't work out very well. 25 men held that for 10 weeks? Anyway, so the Apache Death Cave, they're down in there, and the Navajos say, send out the girls and we'll let you go. Somehow, one of the Navajo got close enough to discover that all of the girls had already been killed. So they packed the entire place full of firewood and set it ablaze and smoked and burned them to death. Over 100 Apaches.
Whoa. Oh, man.
Wow, bad day.
Mm-hmm.
No, that is...
So all of these things are within just a few miles of this town, and the town, being fictional, is more dangerous than Tombstone, and a lawman has a life expectancy of hours from when he puts on the badge.
And
that's the basis of the setting, much less whatever it is I intend to unleash upon them.
Oh man, that's gritty. That is going to be properly intense. Oh man, that is. Paul, you were going to say something then. I'm just sitting here shocked at the minute.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd like to live in that town. I think as a player, I'd be like, you know what? I'm going to move. I'm going to go to the next town that isn't surrounded by 1,000 death things.
Right? No, and what's interesting is there are really towns in that area, and there were during the time. One of the reasons they didn't get left is there's a railroad going through that stopped trying to build a bridge over the gulch. So there's the rail workers. They found silver nearby. They found copper nearby. So there are going to be people taking advantage of all the money. It's a boom town. Boomtowns popped up in places that were absolutely insane and impossible to live in. Boomtowns popped up in Death Valley in California. You know, so mainly the only people left in such a place are those who are desperate to profit or those who are desperate to avoid getting caught for something they did somewhere else. Pretty well defines the idea of the mythical Old West of America.
No, very much.
That sounds horrifying, Jack, if I'm completely honest.
That is the point.
Yeah, I can imagine it is, yes.
So if you're looking for a super gritty campaign coming up, and by the way, I believe it's for a good cause, am I right?
I believe so, yes. We are raising funds for the National Network of Abortion Funds here in the United States so that we can help to make sure that people still have options if they should become pregnant and that pregnancy is unwanted. Bodily autonomy is absolutely critical for every human being, regardless of their sex, their gender, their presentation, any of these things. A dead body, they can't use any of your organs to save someone unless you gave permission ahead of time. So the precedent already is, you absolutely cannot demand that someone give their life or their body, any portion of it, to save another person. This does not change just because that person is a fetus. Even if they were doing late-stage abortions, which almost never happen unless someone has no freaking choice, and believe me, those people are sad. Those people are torn up. Let's not get in their way. Sorry, a little passionate.
Hey, do you know what? I mean, it's a great cause. So definitely check out that. Is there going to be another stream as well that's going to be in aid in aid of that as well, or?
Yes. The other stream is the one I was going to have to take a little longer with because it's my own home setting. I don't use the word homebrew because I like to look forward and say, no, that's just going to be called third party. Because I want it to be a big thing eventually.
Yeah.
But the successor states of Rhaega is also in the actual play. Tomb of Sorrows is in fact in aid of the same cause. But the successor states of Rhaega are a set of 4 or 5 countries, depending on who in the setting you ask, that are the leftover nations of an empire that lasted over 3,000 years and controlled the equivalent of the Roman Empire at its height across multiple continents the same way Rome did. Rhaega is in fact a pseudo-Roman inspired setting. Here's where things get different though. At the beginning of it, I picked my gods. What I did, I was basically just doing a video for world building on how to easily create a pantheon without too much work, and then show how that influences the build of your world. Because basically, once you got your gods, you just role play them, sort of. And the world builds itself.
Okay.
And we're not going to have time for me to go into it too much here, but each of the gods is actually from different pantheons. They're based on gods from different pantheons. Savios, the Zeus equivalent, is actually based on Thor. Kaela, his wife, is not based on Hera. She's based on Asherah, the ancient Hebrew wife of God. Ignia, the goddess of the forge, who, by the way, is an avowed lesbian, is based on Bridget, a name I'm sure you've heard before.
I've heard of Bridget Jones's Diary.
Yeah, for those who haven't, hypothetically, who is Bridget?
So in Irish and Scots pre-Christian times, Bridget is one of the Tuatha De Danann, the Irish gods who came to the islands from somewhere either north or in the sky in flying ships and conquered the Fomor and cleared the island.
That Bridget, yeah.
Yeah, she's...
I think you're vastly overestimating how much Britain or the United Kingdom knows about its own pantheon, especially if it's Scottish.
Yeah.
Because
she married Colin Firth, didn't she? So yeah.
I don't know if you heard this, but Britain, as in England, kind of wiped out all of Scottish history in one go.
I'm actually well aware of that, and yet I still play games with you. Because I don't hold it against the modern people what assholes in the past did. It's important. So those are just examples. Each of the gods comes from a different pantheon, and they're all carefully crafted to have the gods themselves have a more modern, progressive perspective. So even though the game is effectively in 1100s Europe, the society developed in ways that are egalitarian, respectful of all genders and sexualities, respectful of all skin tones. Although mostly they don't have to worry about the skin tone thing, because over 3,000 years of breeding with everyone, because your gods say treat everyone equally, means this empire, which crossed 3 continents, now has a distinct ethnicity that is a mixture of all the ethnicities from around their equivalent to the Mediterranean. And they're all basically a middle to dark brown color with long curly hair that's sometimes kinky. But the hair and eyes can be literally any color because they also have crossbred with elves, dwarves, elementals, and gods. So you got anime hair and eyes, but Mediterranean mixed with African skin tone and facial features. So while it's pseudo-Roman, the grand majority of the empire is in fact POC. Now, they still don't automatically treat people with other skin tones badly, because again, their gods say don't, and their gods are real, and that kind of makes a difference. But you'll occasionally run into somebody from the north who they do consider barbarians, but they don't treat them badly because their skin tone. They occasionally treat them badly because they came rushing in on horses to try to take their stuff. So
That's probably
rather
fair
indifferent.
at that point, to be honest.
So this is 1100 years after the fall of this great empire, and 4 of the successor states, which is Hesperia, roughly based on Moorish Spain, Calte, roughly based on pre-Roman and post-Roman Gaul, edging into Charlemagne's period in France, except that they're ruled by kind of council of chieftains who only picks a king when they have to have one.
I've heard of France. Yeah, I've heard of France.
And to the east of that is Theodonia, which also elects their king, but does it at the beginning, and they then rule for life, kind of like the Holy Roman Empire did.
Okay.
Because Theodonia is in some ways based on Germany at that period. And then
I think when you build a world, Jack, it's slightly more detailed than when I build a world.
Hold that pose, by the way, forever.
Yeah. Sorry, carry on, Jack. I do apologize.
all right, so off to the east, we have Scaria, which is mostly based on a mixture of pre-Roman Dacia, which is what later became the other things it's mixed with, which is Romania and Hungary. And even though it would be early for it, I kind of mixed in some of the ongoing conflict with the Ottoman Empire that occurred in that area, because the 5th nation, which many people do not consider part of the successor states, is Byzantos, which is basically a mixture of the worst parts of the ancient Persian Empire with the worst parts of the Eastern Roman Empire.
They don't sound fun.
They are not. They are rumored to still be ruled by the man who was in control of the Eastern Empire when the whole empire originally fell.
Oh.
Because he made a deal with the Dark Gods.
Not a
of
good
which
guy.
there are 3, and they're not actually part of the other pantheon. If you worship the bright gods, you actually worship all of them. You may have one who's a patron.
Yeah.
But they're a singular religion. Over on the other side, you have another singular religion of the dark gods, but you kind of really have to be messed up in the head to worship them on purpose instead of, if you weren't brainwashed into it, if you chose it, you have to be really messed up in the head because they very specifically exist to destroy the world so that their progenitor can come back. Because at the dawn, before the dawn of time, technically, because the dawn of time starts when the sun first comes up. Anyway, back in the dim and misties, when Savios was the first god to wake up, but there was already something else there. Fairly traditional mythologically, a huge dragon thing called Invidia, which is Latin for envy, was there, and she came along and tried to eat it. The thing is, nobody knows how many gods she ate before she got to him. He was just the first one to become self-aware before it happened. And he got angry at being alone, so he slammed his hands together and screamed, and the first lightning and thunder came and woke up some of the other gods, and that's how the world started. So he fought her, ripped her in half, and her blood and guts were strewn all over the cosmos, with the biggest parts falling into the abyss. And from her brain came Interitus.
I've never known someone to have an origin story of the world as part of their campaign as detailed as yours. Like, I've been reading a lot of like the Greek mythos, and I know about Kronos and Zeus and all that. But Jesus Christ, I'd never thought I'd see someone go, yeah, I can match and then beat that.
The creation myth and the gods can all be seen on my website in the Reagan World articles area.
Jesus.
But I would recommend people to actually pick up the Gods of Rhaegar collection, because it has the fully written out creation myth, fully finished gods, all of them described, 20 gods, with everything you need to run them in 3.5 Pathfinder or 5e. An additional race, an additional monster, a perpetual calendar.
Well, in Homebrew Havoc, I've got a god of geese, so really,
There's
same.
nothing wrong with that.
Same. In fact, I don't think it's a god of geese. I think it's just a geese god. I think humans worship.
It could be a goose god of chaos.
Yeah. I don't know what it is.
Very
Just
reasonable.
people went to a church, and I panicked and went, yeah, it's a geese.
Yeah,
And
the
then
only
Shiv
the
took
only
over.
thing they do is just believe in geese. There's nothing else.
So there are actually 2 additional myths in there, which is the source of the winds and the story of the greatest hero of the setting, the Heracles equivalent, who is also one of their emperors.
That one I know. I know the 12 myths of Heracles because I tried to design a campaign around it.
Yeah, instead of that, the 9, instead of the 12 labors of Heracles, it's the 9 trials of Magnus, and they're a little wild, and they're not all violent, unlike Heracles.
Yeah, the Heracles one, I was reading the story. He just walks up to people and starts murdering them for no reason whatsoever. Like, oh, this guy was in your way. Snap.
One of the things you need to understand about Heracles is the name Heracles, he was dedicated to Hera at his birth in the attempt to keep her from killing him.
Right.
Nonetheless, she haunted him throughout his entire life, and she's the one who drove him mad at least 3 separate times, killing 2 whole families he had put together. Yeah. So much of his madness and much of his violence can actually be traced to Hera, even though he was punished for it.
Yeah.
Well, can I jump in and just ask you a quick question, just while it's on my mind?
Sure.
So you play Ein Mimetic Mori with Paul. What's it like to play with Paul? Is he a pain in the ass?
No, he's brilliant. He's a lot of fun. I really enjoy Crowley.
Yeah. Shut up, Cal.
Besides, somebody has to keep Stoneface from just wrecking everything, because he doesn't have a lot up here, right? He's all messed up. Very violent. No conscience. Really good at killing stuff, though.
He's really good at killing stuff. There was a guard that was in the way and died suddenly. But yeah, Crowley.
I'd hit him in the head with a kosh, and then he fell over, but he saw me on the way down, so then I garroted him.
As you do?
Yeah. Couldn't leave any witnesses, so we murdered him instead. We were trying to be sneaky, in fact, and we didn't want to leave any witnesses, so we killed him.
Right. If no one sees you, it was a successful stealth mission.
Uh-huh. No, yeah, in that campaign, Crowley is like the thinker. He's the leader, so to speak. Like, he comes up with all the plans.
Paul just calls himself the leader, okay.
No, it wasn't my choice.
Do the other players know that?
Yeah, they chose me.
There isn't a leader, per se, but we do occasionally listen to him because he's the most socially apt.
Yeah, I'm the smartest one in terms of planning a heist. Like, everyone else just wants to murder or speak with ghosts or whatever it is that Shiv does.
That time you weren't there, We did fine. We didn't even kill anybody. Maybe it's your fault.
Didn't you almost get your head chopped off the time I wasn't there?
Almost doesn't count.
Oh man, Paul, you're not a pain in the ass, by the way.
I am a
joking.
delight. Thank you very much.
Don't get hurt. It's all right, man.
That's standard all over the British Isles. If you're not abusing the person, how do they know that you love them?
Exactly. You know, it takes
As a player,
I've seen like 7 different comedy specials all about that.
Yeah, that's what we do.
Half my family is Scottish and Irish, so
yeah, we don't just tell people we like them. We mock them or insult them, and that's how they know we like them. So
precisely.
Yeah, pretty normal.
Yeah,
we should probably get back to tabletop games or LARPs. I don't care. Role playing.
Yeah, I suppose so. So I've seen I mean, you create so much. You mentioned the Pantheons and world building in general, but there's a section on your website that says that you make custom villains as well. And I just wanted to pick your brain. In your mind, what makes a good villain?
There are a number of possible answers to that, but the most important one is they have to grip. They have to get the player's attention one way or another. If the players aren't invested in them as a villain, then they're just a foe. They're just something to be knocked down and walked over. But if the players are invested in them, then they'll gladly return to fight this same guy 3-4 times and not even feel frustrated because they're invested. They want to see what happens. They want to see where he goes. One of the ways to do this, probably, there are alternate ways of looking at it, but one of the ways to do this is to make them in some way sympathetic. They don't have to be a good person. There doesn't have to be anything good about them. But if you can't understand in any way how they got where they are, if you can't figure, okay, well, this happened and this happened and this happened, so that drove them to this, and now they believe this, it has to be understandable. It doesn't have to be rational, because people often aren't. But you have to be able to see the connections. Every now and then it's fine to have a villain who has just snapped or started out completely crazy and wants to do villainy for villainy sake. But the grand majority of thinking beings in the universe don't operate that way. Many of them think they're actually the hero. They're doing what they have to do for whatever reason. Or the most likely situation is they have a goal and they don't care who they hurt getting to it. Villainy comes from when you think your aims and needs are more important than the lives of other people.
Amazing. Yeah, that's blown my mind. I think from campaigns I played in, I think the villains that I get invested in, it's usually when they've got one over on you at like near the start, when you're like low leveled characters, and then they turn up and they just like wipe the floor with you or counterspell everything or whatever it is. That's because this is like the first one that your party is technically lost to. Then you want to track them down and get your revenge, and and it's that sort of, you know, the heroes wanting to get one over on the villain, you know. So that's what I've noticed in a campaign anyway.
There's a couple of good approaches to doing that specifically. One is you start out with the BBEG at their full power. The BBEG is his 20th level, what the hell ever, that he's going to be at the end of the campaign when the PCs get to him, right? You have him show up, and maybe he doesn't even have to engage the PCs, but he's the one who they see wipe out their village, or that they know wiped out their village, or whatever it is that was precious to them in some way. Make it personal. You don't have to kill their whole backstory, and you certainly don't do so without making sure the players are okay with it. but have him threaten or attack something they care about. Maybe it's them. That's fine. And he trashes them, and he goes off, and they then work their way up through all his lieutenants and all of his schemes and eventually fight him. That works. Another approach that I've done, which was a little different, was have them run into the BBEG when he's just starting out. Maybe he's a couple levels higher than them. And they defeat his lower level plot. So he goes somewhere else away from them, gets a little better, comes back with another plot. They defeat his next higher level plot. So they keep having to fight the same guy. His big thing is he's got escape routes. He's got ways to get away. And he's just a little better than them until they narrow the gap at the end. But then they get to see this villain grow and possibly even drive him to grow. They are the nemesis, just as he is theirs.
Love it. That's fantastic.
I like that. That's
Paul,
really
what are your
clever.
thoughts? Yeah.
Most of my villains just kill their pet, and that gets them really invested.
Yeah.
It does, but it's also really obvious.
Yeah, absolutely.
What you've got to think of is why.
I'll be honest
Why
with you,
did they
I
do
don't
that?
actually think I've ever made a BBEG.
What?
I've never run a campaign long enough, have I? My longest campaign up until Homebrew Havoc was the 6th session. The closest I've got to is Strahd, who did kill a pet. The biggest villains in Homebrew Havoc are just people I've played as complete assholes. It's just they are the worst kind of person.
That's
Worst
fair.
kind of person is good, but why does the worst kind of person have to kick a puppy or kill a puppy?
No.
What
No.
does it get them?
Say
What
again?
does it achieve?
Well,
for
to be
What
fair, they haven't yet, but someone has stolen, at the time of recording, Dodo's fridge. But it's not because they're cruel, it's because they rarely want the fridge, which is the closest thing they have to a pet.
mean, what does it accomplish for the villain?
I can't tell you because we haven't had that show yet, but you might know by the time
Legit.
someone is watching this.
Legit. No, I was just saying you've got to figure out why they're doing what they're doing. If they, in most cases, if they go out of their way to harm a pet or a loved one or any of those things, they're doing so for a purpose. They have to have a reason to be there. Just like it's best at the end of things, if you really want engagement and you want that BBEG to stay and fight finally and die, he has to have a reason to fight them. He has to have a reason not to run away again.
Mm-hmm.
Because any sane bad guy is going to look at the situation and go, I'm outmatched. I'm not fighting them. I'll come back with whatever. So if you want him, her, it, they, whatever, if you want them to be understandable and believable, they have to have reasons for each step they take.
Yeah, good advice.
Just
Really
like
good advice.
Just like when I create my worlds, I roleplay the gods in the process of creation. Roleplay your villain. Get in their head.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just do stuff.
That's
Strahd
really-
especially. He has a whole set of goals, and they set them out for you. They explain them for you quite well. None of those goals, unless he's in fact just doing it to upset the characters to make them come after him, because of course he does in many of the versions need them to come after him.
Yeah.
Strahd's a really good example of the villain who has to have the final confrontation with you because you're part of his story.
Yeah.
That's
I think
awesome.
that was it when I had Strahd almost eat the dog. It was
Oh, yeah.
as a show of power, and Strahd was just expressing like, look, I could do this and there's nothing you could do to stop me. I'm not going
Which
to.
means it could have been any of you and not right.
Yeah. Like, I'm not going to eat the dog, but if I wanted to, I could. This is my choice not to. There's nothing you can do.
Right.
And one of the players did try and do something, and he got knocked on his ass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, that's a good reason. Displays of power
Mm-hmm.
have a purpose, and that's valid.
Yeah, amazing. Just want to ask you, we haven't got long left, but you do a lot of services for RPGs. Can you take us through a few of them? What services you offer?
Oh, like what I actually will do for commission.
Hell yeah.
Well, first of all, I haven't gotten a lot of them, sadly. Maybe my prices are too high. I don't know. But I will build you monsters specifically for your setting. You tell me what kind of thing you want, the vague threat level you want it to be. Don't bother with CR, it's wrong. Just tell me the level of the party you want it to be a threat to, and I'll get you something that feels right and fits your world. All you have to do, you can be as involved or not involved as you want. For example, I have built for someone a high-powered celestial to use as an antagonist because she had evil PCs. I built a giant star-faced mole, mutant star-faced mole that was there to dig up underneath people and yank them underground as a.
That's cool. I love that.
Yeah. Whatever you tell me, the idea of what kind of a feel you want it to have, or you can go as far as I want a monster who looks like this and does this. I just need it built better than I can do. Whatever. Any of those things. So bespoke monsters, basically. The same thing applies with BBEGs. The thing about a BBEG, and of course the thing that distinguishes a villain from a monster, is very often the villains are going to be player character classes. They don't have to be. You can totally have a villain who is also a monster. Like on my website available is Baylor, who is the king of the Fomor. This is after he has had his eye blown out the back of his skull by Lou of the Long Hand in Irish myth. He's technically dead, and he's been brought back to life by the Black Crochan, or the Black Cauldron from Welsh myth specifically. It also showed up in a Disney movie and the Prydain Chronicles, but I'm going further back than that. But he's been brought back to life, so now he's an undead pseudo-demon thing searching for his eye.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool. So villains and monsters.
Gods, villains, monsters. I will build gods for you. Again, my format for what all information I include in a god is free on my website.
And for all TTRPG, or
like I have a list on the front of my website of which ones I've been involved with, which ones I'm already familiar with. I just recently became more familiar with Cypher, and I'm translating one of my supplements, the Beastkin Vampires, into Cypher. So that I'll have multiple systems there.
Oh.
The ones I build all the time, like you'll see them once a week, are Scion 1E from White Wolf, Chronicles of Darkness, which is the New World of Darkness, Vampire the Requiem, Changeling the Lost, Werewolf the Forsaken, that group. Mutants and Masterminds 3rd edition, Pathfinder 1st edition, D&D 5e, and groups. Those are the ones I know the best. Amazing. I can build for Shadowrun, I can build for Genesis, I can build for Star Wars FFG, Fantasy Flight Games, Edge Games now, I guess. I can build for Cyberpunk, any of the 3 versions. Obviously, I could build for 3.5 easily. If someone's willing to pay me, I'll go back as far as 2 or 1 or basic set. I know them. I can build for them.
Amazing, man. I mean, you got so much experience. There's a list on your website, so anyone who wants to do that, check it out. I understand Paul has something he would like to do with you.
Yes, so as people may have...
I don't know.
As people may have noticed, now in season 2 we have an extra special little. I don't want to call it a thingamy-bob. Let's call it a thingamy-bob.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, good name. That we like to do at the end of the show.
What we call it?
Yeah, whatchamacallit, thingamy-bob, you know. That we like to do with our guest, and it's take the Jack. You described it really well before the interview. How did you describe it?
You're taking the standard array from Dungeons and Dragons and putting it into the stats that you think are most important as a game master.
Yeah, that. Excellent. Write that down and send it me, and I'll say that every episode. So the stats, as you describe them as, are descriptions, improv, story, showmanship, combat, and rules knowledge. So obviously we've got 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, 8. Do you want to start at the top or the bottom?
Well, first I'd like to say I'm a big fan of roll 4 dice 6, drop the lowest, reroll 1s and 2s, because people, they're heroic. Also, all my stats are higher than that, but I'll get back to that later. Right. If I have to choose, I've been told by plenty of people they don't want my experience points. I've done too much crazy shit and it really hurt me. So most important, we're going from 15 first?
Yep.
Or are we going from 8
you.
first?
It's up to you. It's your bit.
All right.
Whichever way you want.
So, showmanship goes at 8.
Oh, okay.
And it's still really important.
Yep.
Okay. What were the other ones? Rules?
Yeah, we've got rules, combat, story, improv, and descriptions.
Rules go at the one right above 8.
10.
Ooh.
Okay.
Combat's next.
Okay.
Then story. Then improv.
Wow.
Why is improv the most important?
So you should have descriptions as the most important.
Oh, yeah, sorry. That would be wrong. Okay, so descriptions goes. Okay, so improv goes at the top.
Right.
Story, descriptions.
Okay.
Combat.
Yeah, and then you've got rules and showmanship.
Right.
Hmm.
Showmanship is least important. I'll get to it in the right order. Okay, so at the top, the reason the ability to improvise is so important is the story's not about you. It's not your story. It's your world, maybe. It's the game you're running. But it's not about you. It's about the players and their characters. If you do not, even in tabletop, but especially in LARP for me, it was always characters, story, rules, in that order. Okay? What the characters do is the real story. How they decide to handle it, that's the story. But without an underlying story, without the world built enough for them to interact with and an idea of what the bad guy's story is, you can't get that. So improv, followed by story. Underneath story, you have
descriptions.
Rules, right?
Description.
If you don't have good descriptions, they don't know what they're interacting with. They don't know what to do or how to do it. They have a vague notion that they could hit the guy, but they certainly can't go, haha, he said there was a sconce on the wall with a torch in it. I can run over there, grab the torch, and throw it into the liquid that's on the floor. Poof. Mm-hmm. With good descriptions, you can point out all the things in the area that they can interact with without making any one of them seem too important. So what's my next one down?
Combat.
Combat is important. You have to be able to handle the combat when it arises. That doesn't mean it has to always be there, or even that in some games it's important as a focus at all. But when it happens, you've got to be on top of it. You've got to keep it moving. You've got to keep it as descriptive as possible. Because I don't know about you, but I hit him for 10 damage. He hit you for 3 damage. You missed. What does that evoke in your brain? It evokes rolling dice and being bored
Yeah.
with math.
I could never be bored with math, but I understand your point.
All right.
I'm a literature guy.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
good at math,
numerical.
but
It's fine. You can do the languages and the rules, and I'll do the proper things.
Woo!
No.
Nap. Anyway,
Meow.
all right, so the next one I told you.
Was rules knowledge.
Rules knowledge is important as a foundation. Get the best rules you can. However, at the table, knowing the rules is often much less important than the ability to roll with the punches, get your player characters invested with a good story and a good description of what's going on in that story, etc. And it's certainly not knowing the rules is important mainly so you know when it's okay to break them in the service of the story.
Mm-hmm.
When it's okay to break a rule in service of better combat. When it's okay to break a rule in order to let the player character do the cool thing that makes sense in the setting and the story, but the rules don't allow. If the rules don't allow it, but it fits in with everything you're doing, do it. That's why rules are so low.
I like it.
And then the very lowest was
With showmanship.
Showmanship. Showmanship develops on its own. All you need to do, if you can give them the clear descriptions we talked about, and you have a solidly built story, by story I mean background and hooks, and they are performing appropriately in that, the show comes from that. Just like the story you're telling comes from their actions. The show comes from the interaction with the things you put forth. Once you've made them, all of them solid, you will develop showmanship. Just because I'm great at voices and can do all kind of crazy stuff doesn't mean any of that is critical for being a DM. I've been at tables where the DM or game master was not able to differentiate between their NPCs by vocal sound, but they did so by the way the character talked. Is that really showmanship? No, but it got it across. I knew who they were.
Oh, yeah.
Showmanship in TTRPG, while it probably is more important in actual play than at the table, our game, our art form, because for me it is art, craft, and game, relies on imagination. And it's not our imagination that it relies on. It's the imagination of the players. And you don't want to handhold that too much. You don't want to direct it too much. Give them a good idea of what's going on and let them fill in the details, because their imagination is going to be so much more than one person could think of.
Amazing. Oh, man, that's
Beautiful.
so right. How was that, Paul? How'd you do?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's his thing. It's very similar to my own. We got the top three and the bottom three pretty much the same. It's just slightly different orders.
Interesting.
Yeah. There's some people... I'm waiting for someone to put rules knowledge in the top three. No one's ever done it yet.
I know it's done that.
No.
Yeah.
I know a very good game master who would put it at the top.
Oh.
His argument is, if you don't know how the world works, how can you possibly run a story in it?
I don't know, but I'm on session 15 of Homebrew Havoc, and I don't think I've ever read the manual. Like,
You should definitely read, at the very least, the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide. Everything else you can grab as you need. But read those two. There's actually quite a bit of good advice in them.
there is. Every now and then I'll see on Twitter, like, oh, for anyone looking for this information, it's on page 238 of the Dungeon Master's Guide. I'm like, is it? I needed that 17 sessions ago. What?
Yeah, man, this stuff is it's a good read, man. It just,
Yeah.
It is.
Good on
For
that.
different genres, by the way, just as a GURPS pitch, regardless of which game you're running, if you want more background on either a historical era, if you can find the old 3rd edition books for GURPS for various historical eras, they're the best researched books out there. The modern 4th edition GURPS Space, GURPS Horror, GURPS Fantasy, they're mostly not rules books. They are instruction manuals on how to run the genre. And they are brilliant.
Nice.
Amazing.
GURPS Mystery is written by a mystery writer and a lawyer. GURPS Cops is written by a cop and a lawyer. GURPS Tactical Shooting is written by a special forces guy and a gun smith.
People who know their shit.
Correct. GURPS Martial Arts was written by 3 people, all of whom were martial artists, one of whom, while he was writing it, was on a world tour of various monasteries and things, learning new martial arts.
Whoa.
Jesus Christ. And what's that
Man,
for?
man.
So
And it
GURPS?
it includes Western martial arts, the various things of HEMA, etc. It's not just Asian.
Very nice.
So again, if you want, good source material, even if you're never going to run GURPS because it's too gritty for you, which, by the way, watch the GURPS show, and I think you'll come to understand it's not as, while my setting may be gritty, the game is not as hard as people think it is.
Okay.
It's
Oh, wow.
very smooth at the table.
All right. Oh man, that's amazing. And I could speak to you for hours and hours and hours, but we are pretty much out of time. Paul, do you want to say anything before we do the sign-offs?
Thank you for being here, Jack, and thank you for enthralling us with your tales of your Pantheons. Honestly, personally, I do like Pantheons, but it's only been the Greek one that has captured me because of how much lore there is. And
There's a lot more available.
yeah.
Absolutely. It is the one that Western audiences especially know the most.
Yeah.
Norse mythology is right behind it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons for that is because both of those are actually in the Encyclopedia Britannica, which is the first place I found them.
Yeah. And I'm also reading Lore Olympus, which has just finished its season 2. So go check that out.
It's actually, from what I've heard, it's actually pretty good on most of its stories.
Yeah.
One of the things to remember even about Greek myth, though, is there's no such thing as canon.
No.
There is no single version of the story. Don't let them tell you there is.
No. Which is upsetting because I like single versions of stories. But yes. But no, that's it from me. Thank you very much for, like I said, telling us all about your Pantheons. It was a whirlwind of words and emotions.
So good, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I really need to learn how to read. Yeah. So, I mean, before we go, then I ask this of every guest that we have: is there anyone out there that you want to thank or give a shout out to?
Absolutely. I want to thank Drake at Lion Knight 42 for giving me the opportunity to run these actual plays. He's doing all the behind the scenes, all the production stuff. I'm not ready to do that yet, so I wouldn't be able to do these at all without his help. I'd like to thank all of my cast for both games, which, they've been announced, and please go look at my Twitter and you can see the ads and you can share the ads and you can get more people to come see these actual plays. I wouldn't push it this hard if it were just me doing actual plays for the first time. These are for charity, and there is no point me going out there and even telling a good story if I can't get enough viewers and donations to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Yeah. So push for charity. Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing, man. So where can people find you to learn more about you?
Okay.
Yeah.
On Twitter at Jack Gogsbane. Jack is capitalized, Gogsbane is capitalized. Of course, you run them all together because it's Twitter. Of Gods and Gamemasters, you search that on Facebook, that or Jack of Tales. I pop up on Facebook. Of Gods and Gamemasters on Drive-Thru. Of Gods and Gamemasters on DM's Guild. Of Gods and Gamemasters on TikTok. Of godsandgamemasters.com is my website.
3 of these, because I only do 3 links per person, will be in the description below. So
And then within that, I'm sure whatever you click on there will lead to more links where you can
so
go
you'll
to
be able to
other
find,
things Jack's
pick your
involved.
platform.
It does, actually. Like I said, the Twitter is probably the most important one because that has my drum. It has the link to the website and the drum, and from there you can get literally all these places.
Yeah,
so
that's amazing.
Of Gods and Gamemasters on YouTube, by the way, it's actually kind of where I started, and I was like, I'm just gonna make YouTube videos about world building, and I'll get on Twitter and talk about them a little bit and get people over there, and it just kind of went off, and suddenly 3 weeks later I had to buy a website, and
it's gone on and got bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's amazing to see.
It's
okay,
huge. I need more people to actually, buy stuff.
Yeah.
Subscribe, etc. Because I'm not actually making any money yet. But
just doing it for the love and sharing your vast experience as well. So make sure everyone listening and watching this check out Jack's website and see what he can do to improve your world. Paul, is there anything you'd like to say before we go?
Not particularly. You can find me on Tuesdays, potentially Wednesdays whenever this comes out, and Thursdays for Blades of the Dark, where you can see myself and Jack be mastered by CC on on Wednesdays. There may or may not be a Doctor Who TTRPG currently running, like I said, depending on release dates. And on Thursday is our flagship show, Homebrew Havoc, where while the Geese God doesn't quite match up to Jack's Pantheons, may or may not play a slightly more important role by the time this comes out. Who knows?
Oh, really?
Who knows?
The Goose God.
So
amazing.
The Goose God is his compatriot named Maverick.
Hey,
hey.
not, I'm afraid.
Oh man, if you can get us flying,
I've never
flying
seen that
jets
movie.
around, that'd be
I've
sick.
never seen that movie.
What?
Never seen.
Well,
Top
this
Gun.
Well, we're going to have to sign this off now so you can go and watch it, man. Okay, right. I've been Cal. This has been Cal's Questions. That just leaves me to say thank you so much to our guest, Jack Callan, today. Amazing, sharing a wealth of knowledge with us all. So make sure you check out all of his stuff. And yeah, that's it. So you can find me at CleeDND on Twitter. Go to cleednd.com. But we'll be back again for another episode of Cal's Questions. Thank you and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.